Hello, it's Monday. This is a special edition, another special edition of the Zogby Report, real and unscripted. And as always, I'm John, and I'm here with my son and managing partner, Jeremy. Good morning.
Hey, how you doing, senior partner?
I'm doing okay. I'm I'm doing really well, and we got a lot to talk about, and something different, something that's near and dear to both of our hearts. We have some special data from a poll. Two issues that have been very special and very close to me. One is the status of the American dream, and the other is what I have perceived anyway to be the real paradigm for the debate of the future, as opposed to liberal versus conservative, two spent horses. I believe the debate of the future is libertarian versus communitarian, which we'll get into. I want to tell listeners and watchers that we are imminently expecting an announcement from President Joe Biden. Consensus of opinion appears that he's going to announce a second campaign, a second term. But as always, nobody really knows for sure what they're talking about. And so we'll wait. And once that announcement is made, we'll come back with another special edition. That sounds right, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But we have so much more than politics on our minds. And so let's talk first of all about this new paradigm of libertarian versus communitarian. As you know firsthand, I've been following that since the middle part of the first decade of this century. It's something that I've written extensively about, not only for Forbes, but in my book, The Way Will Be, which came out in 2008. And essentially, by definition, libertarian is what it sounds like. Less government in our lives, more emphasis on personal freedoms, liberation, free markets, don't tread on me. What those who subscribe to libertarianism would call the original sentiment of the settlers, the colonists, the revolutionaries, and America as an idea, versus a concept that we don't hear spelled out or defined sufficiently, but obviously communitarianism is that notion that I, as an individual, get to breathe, get to live, get to act and interact, and get to thrive as part of a community. And it is the community that breathes life and essence into me. Those are oversimplifications of both, but you did a poll this weekend, and you tested these sentiments among about 1,000 or so likely voters. Let me let you take it from there. What did you find, and what did you feel about what you found?
Yeah, well, first off, let's address the elephant in the room about the Biden announcement. I think it is going to come very soon. I think it has to come very soon because, as we have all known since last week, there's another person who's entered the race, and that's Robert F. Kennedy Jr. First, it was Marianne Williamson, but there have been some polls over the last couple of weeks that show initially he had 10% of the Democratic primary voter share, and then USA Today Suffolk came out last week and showed that RFK Jr. has 14%. And so my assessment and sense is that why wait another month if you're already starting to see a little bit of growth and intrigue around the name, the political scion, historically important name Kennedy. And so I think Biden will come out very soon. I think he should. Meanwhile, there are new polls that come out about, it seems to be historic highs in terms of those who say they want somebody new. So, but I think Biden has to come out and bring those numbers down. That aside, okay, so getting into our data, and my father already alluded to the libertarian and the communitarian. Typically, we ask this question in an A versus B style. The tenets of what makes a libertarian, the tenets of what makes a communitarian. And I mean, the way I see it is those are very useful questions. But if you allow the public to box themselves into A versus B, they will follow suit. And I thought it would be interesting to divide up those tenets. There are 4 tenets that make up a libertarian, and there are 4 that make up what we're labeling communitarian. Shuffle them and do a multi-punch and ask voters which ones speak to your personal philosophy of government. Now, right off the bat, I have to say that you're going to find a lot of crossover. And actually, I think that's interesting because truthfully, I think all humans are walking contradictions. I think to be a contradiction is an absolute essential reality of being a human being. What that means translated to politics is that 100% of Democrats aren't 100% liberal, and 100% of Republicans aren't 100% conservative. There's a lot of overlap. So what we do want to see are what are the tenets of those 2 philosophies that actually score or rank highest overall and among key demographics. So that's what we're going to do. And then I'm going to hand it back over to you to talk about the American dream. So we ask, please select the statements that best align with your personal philosophy of government. I'm going to go through each tenet. Emphasis on securing freedom of the individual by limiting power of the government. That's a libertarian. A preference for civil liberties with limited government under the rule of law. Again, libertarian. An attitude of laissez-faire of the government toward conducting private business. Once again, libertarian. And then the last, probably the mother of all libertarian tenets, would be that government which governs the least governs the best. Okay. Again, these were shuffled for each poll respondent. Then we get into the communitarian, emphasis on the role of the community in defining and shaping individuals, commitment to each other over the individual uniqueness, and then government should use bold and swift action to right wrongs where there is an inequality and injustice. Those latter ones are communitarian. So looking at voters overall, of all parties, of all ages and races, what was the one that came out on top? 42%, this ranked number 1, said an emphasis on securing the freedom of the individual by limiting the power of government. That was the most commonly ranked one. Not too far below is government should use bold and swift action to right wrongs where there is inequality and injustice, 38%. So 42 on the securing freedom, the libertarian, 38% selecting the quintessential bold and swift, which is more of a liberal view. We could say communitarian too, because the purpose is to heal or improve the community. And so what that tells me right there is, had we done A versus B, and we didn't do a multi-punch, select all that speak to you, this is probably what the breakdown would have been. It would have been split. There's no surprise there. But where I want to take it to the next level is I want to look at this by party. And so among Democrats, by far, the most commonly cited tenet that spoke to their personal philosophy of government was that government should use bold and swift action to right the wrongs where there's inequality and injustice. 53% of Democrats said that aligns with their philosophy of government. There's really nothing that comes even close to that. It falls, 20 to 25 points lower. The next one would be commitment to each other over individual uniqueness. That's very communitarian, with 34% selecting that. So clearly, most Democrats are on board with that. But interestingly, some tenets of libertarian faith spoke to them. Like 30% had an emphasis on securing freedom of the individual by limiting the power. Remember, not all Democrats are pure progressive or 100% liberal. Within the Democratic Party, you still have a constituency or a camp, whatever you want to call it, who are more like classical liberals. Think of your 60s free speech liberals, anti-war liberals. They're going to get behind some libertarian sentiment, no question about it. But in the end, bold and swift action wins the day among the Democrats. Let's look at Republicans. On the flip side, Republicans, 51% cited most the emphasis on securing freedom of the individual by limiting the power of government. And then the next one, 46%, said that government, which governs the least, governs the best. And interestingly, within the Republicans, you have some that say that they personally align with some communitarian elements. A quarter of Republicans say government should use bold and swift action to right wrongs where there's inequality and injustice. That doesn't come as a surprise to me. Remember, there are moderate Republicans. There are Republicans who are conservative on some issues, but maybe liberal on social issues and see a role for government. Remember, Republicans, by and large, are big government. I mean, they prefer, most of them prefer that there be a $1 trillion military budget. Okay, that is the essence of big government. And so it goes back to my point that, we voters are walking contradictions. We have preferences, but we have some internal contradictions, and that's totally normal. The name of the game is to see where the numbers are most intense, and we're still seeing that. And then I'm just going to close with independents and then turn it over to you, Dad. Independents are going to be the game changer here. They usually are. Independents today are leaning more libertarian because 44% of independents, or I should say, the most commonly selected tenet of a philosophy was 44% of independents saying emphasis on securing the freedom of the individual by limiting the power of government. The second one would be preference for liberties with a limited government under the rule of law. That came in at 35%, but still significantly 34% of independent voters aligned with the notion of bold and swift government action. So I think that that's a fascinating exploration into our political landscape and how we have to remember that Americans are not either or. It's not black and white. There is a gray area, and this is a messaging battlefield. And which messages today win the day? When you look at it overall, it's the libertarian sentiment, but the communitarian sentiment is just as rooted. So that's my analysis.
This is a very smart way of conducting this research. And very briefly, I think the additional takeaway here is that, number one, the middle is rotted, and the middle being the agencies, political parties. Because what's happened is that both political parties used to need to be big tents to build governing coalitions. Today, it's all or nothing and winner take all, and very little room for dissent in both the Democratic and the Republican Party. What this reminds us of, I think, is that the path to the future is actually a softer path, not a hard ideological path. Softer path where there is crossover, where there's interlocking shared ideas,
Hmm.
and where both parties see it in their interests to embrace elements of these two potent ways of worldviews. Libertarian, most people will tell you, look, there's a lot about libertarianism that is appealing to me, but not everything. By the
Hmm.
same token, you look at the communitarian stuff here too, you see the number of Republicans and independents and elsewhere conservatives. And what you discover is, sure, I can accept some of these principles if there are leaders out there who can bridge these worldviews rather than appeal to the hardened ideological views. We might have breakthroughs in policy.
Hmm.
But we're going to continue tracking this because it's important. And I think that it's not only important because it's new, maybe to the viewers and listeners here, but because this is what you'll be hearing in the near future. At least I
Yeah.
hope it is. I
It,
hope it
it
is.
and that's a great way of really consulting aspiring campaign managers, political office seekers, because that's very true. I before you start on the American dream, I
Mhm.
just want to point out we have data on whether Americans are more concerned about pollution of soil and water versus carbon emissions in the atmosphere. I think that's a fascinating debate. There is a debate if you ask the voters. We have data on the Second Amendment, fully automatic. Does the Second Amendment apply to fully automatic weapons? Should it rather? Should it apply to semi-automatic? We have questions about inflation. What do voters think is the main culprit or the root of the problem of the phenomenon of inflation? We have some really intriguing stuff that I'm proud to say no other polling firm has.
Mhm.
But to elaborate that the best, why don't you hit that point home with the American dream?
Okay, little story. That's what happens when you get old, right? Uh, this is this is something that goes back actually to the late '80s with me and discovering the phenomenon of structural um, recessions that basically, uh, starting in the '70s and '80s, our recessions were no longer driven by temporary layoffs, buildup of inventories. They were structural and permanent, meaning people were being laid off were never going to go back to their old jobs or old kinds of jobs again. We moved from an industrial to um, an information is the term we used to use, economy. And so I started wondering as early as the late '80s here in our community, and then we moved into uh, the nation doing our polling. How is that impacting the worldview and the dreams and aspirations of individuals? And what I discovered was, on one hand, Americans were believing in the American dream, but on the other hand, they were starting to redefine the American dream away from the notion that, look, I can succeed financially. If I work hard, I could rise up the ladder. I could become CEO. I could own the sports car, build a swimming pool, move to the suburbs, etc. Americans were beginning to adjust, not giving up on the American dream, but not so sanguine that they could achieve that old sense of the American dream, which was a very material dream. Rather, what they were saying was, you know what, the American dream to me is living a genuine, spiritually fulfilled life. That doesn't necessarily mean God. It means being satisfied with the direction my life has taken, that the world's a better place because I'm a better person because I'm here. And so we started testing these American dreams. And what we discovered from the early 90s to the late 90s, which technically, were boom years, but the layoffs continued. More and more people were working at a job that pays less. Those who had succeeded financially were saying, but this isn't all I want my life to be about. And others, boomers, who were entering middle age at that time, were saying, I got to stop getting my head out of the 60s. What's my second act? What am I supposed to do with the rest of my life? And so we started seeing the growth in the numbers of people that were identifying the American dream as fundamentally a spiritual dream. So by the end of the decade, the material dream and the spiritual dream were even among the American public. And then we watched the spiritual American dream, that sense of living a genuine life, grow. So here we're revisiting this after a little more than a decade, and it's fascinating what we're discovering, that today those who identify the American dream is more about inner peace and living a genuine life. Now 52%, a majority, whereas those who still identify the American dream as that traditional material notion of success are down to 36.
I'm sorry, can I just read, because the data it cuts off the question. Can I just read those two choices?
Absolutely, yeah.
So what you're calling the material, we wrote out, the American dream is more about personal fulfillment through material success and climbing the social ladder. Mm-hmm. That's the material side. And then what you're calling the spiritual was written out as the American dream is more about finding inner peace and tranquility through deeper meaning. So yes. With that said.
Okay, but still it's a spiritual dream that now is far outpacing by 16 percentage points, highest I've ever seen it, the American dream. So let's put that in context. Is the American dream achievable? 57% say still that it is. And let's get that. Is that it? Mm-hmm. And
yep.
And 21% say it isn't, but 22% are not sure. And that's probably the most troubling figure. The 21% who say that it is not achievable, that's about what it has always been. And those are people not necessarily at the bottom of the financial spectrum, but those are people who just don't see a path forward towards success or spiritual fulfillment. The 22% who question whether the American dream is alive or not, those are the people that need to be injected with some hope and with some spirit. But clearly, despite all that we have been through over the last 2 or 3 decades, solid majority, 57%, still say the American dream, whether material or spiritual, is still achievable. Let's scroll back. I want to see age. I want to look at age.
There you go.
Okay, let's do right in the middle there, 18 to 29. It's a majority, 54. 57% of the 30 to 49 age group, 56% of 50 to 64, 63% of those over 65. I think it's rather remarkable that it's a majority of all age groups that still believe that in some form the American dream is still alive amidst an amazing amount of turmoil. Tells me the spirit, broadly defined, the sense of possibility and hope that America always was, is still alive, just as, on the other hand, so many of our institutions that are supposed to deliver those promises seem to be moribund.
I just want to make a note of what we should do, because we can get this data, but it would be, what we should do is isolate those who were materialist, American dream is material success and climbing the social ladder, and then see among those, what percent believe it's still achievable versus the spiritualists who say it's still achievable. And something tells me that the materialists are going to be a little bit more hopeless. That's my hypothesis.
That's my hypothesis too. What I also am going to suggest is that you take those who define the American dream in different ways and test that against your previous chart of communitarian libertarian. That's just a curiosity there.
Sure.
To be honest with you, that is that's all I really want to talk about today. I'll just end on this note. I go back and forth on Joe Biden running. It does look like he's going to. Frankly, in terms of his record, he should. He's got a record to stand on. I think the only thing that may be bothering the Democratic voters and the American people is the sense that of his age, that he's too old, not healthy, and robust enough. But let's see what he does, and let's see how it plays, and then we'll be back with our podcast.
Okay.
Last word?
No, I'm good. I think that we, okay. No, I will have a last word. We read the polls every day, every morning. The first thing I do is I go to Real Clear Politics to see what the latest polls that have been released, and any of the other news sites, what new polls are out. And all polling firms are good. Some better, some pretty good, some okay. But I just think what we have always done different. I noticed this about you decades ago. I mean, going back to the early 2000s, was that we go beyond numbers, and we really try to figure out what is the soul of America. And I thought that these two data presentations that we did is the closest that we could get with data today in probing and trying to answer that question. What is the soul of America today?
Yeah, I agree. And I think the more we do these polls, the more reason why I continue to be the optimist of them. Despite a lot of extra special effort to make me a pessimist, I'm still optimistic because I think the American people are a whole lot smarter than Washington, and elitists believe they are. Well, till we meet again, right after the Biden announcement.
Yeah. Take care.
Okay.